What's the scariest trust your gut feeling you felt before and glad you did so? Story 1. In the days of MySpace, a girl I knew through high school extracurriculars posted a vague warning about an active duty sailor she met online who seemed normal but suddenly would not take no for an answer. I messaged her to ask if she was okay, and she told me his name, warning me not to engage with him if he tried to contact me. She then mentioned how she had been deleting some of her pictures and profile details because she honestly thought he might try to show up where she worked or even at our shared after-school activity. Literally the following week, I had shown up for said extracurricular and was in the process of setting up with a few other people. The girl was in the women's restroom down a long, dark, isolated hall far removed from the primary entryway. Out of nowhere, a guy who looked high schoolish in face and build and could fit in with us only in that sense, but who I had never seen before, showed up and began looking around as if he knew the place and knew what he was after. I was used to other kids around my age dropping by to visit us out of curiosity, but they would normally just stand around awkwardly until approached. This guy's level of focus struck me as extremely unsettling, and I could not shake this feeling that I needed to tell the girl first and any nearby adult. Because I felt so uneasy, I already knew I did not want to talk to him, so I looked at the sign-in sheet at the entryway. He was the person the girl told me about. As soon as I knew that he could not take notice of where I was headed, I moved quickly down the hall toward the women's restroom, where I found the girl and told her what I saw and how I knew it was him. She started crying uncontrollably, and I told her to lock the door and that I was going to tell the adults in charge as soon as I could find them. I then found two of the adults and told them what I saw and knew of the situation. The fact that the person in question was literally just in the other room from us and that the girl had already locked herself in the bathroom. I was only 15. I do not know how I stayed so calm. The adults acted immediately, escorting the guy off the premises and filing a police report. Story 2. I noticed pain in my lower back one morning and thought I slept on it wrong or something. Throughout the day, it continued and started to feel like when you get kicked in the groin. Thought to myself, it is probably something serious. Did a self-check and did not think I noticed anything, and had my girlfriend do the same, and she was not sure. Called a urology office on my gut feeling and got the last appointment before Christmas break. It was cancer, but it was super early, got an orchiectomy a few days later, then some mild chemotherapy a few months later, and have been just fine ever since. Edit for more information because this blew up. I had noticed some similar pain that lasted a weekend or so, a month or so before the pain that sent me to the doctor. The doctor was very kind considering I walked into his office and said, "I think I have cancer." He and a fellow both did a gloved hands-on exam of both testicles. They decided to do an ultrasound on both testicles next at the same exam. Showed me both images and there was a huge difference between the normal and irregular. The next step was surgery to remove the affected testicle, which is called an orchiectomy. Scheduled it for 3 days later with the same doctor in an outpatient surgery center attached to their building. Surgery went well, and then I was kind of in limbo for a few months. The urologist recommended radiation therapy, talked to a radiation oncologist who recommended chemotherapy, talked to a chemotherapy oncologist who recommended observation with the urologist. Had a follow-up with all three and finally decided to do 2 rounds of carboplatin at a highish dose, but over a short period. Shaved my head into a mohawk, expecting to lose my hair, but did not, and just ended up looking like a goober. Had some medical debt and paid that over student loans, which briefly affected my credit. Though the experience made me realize how caring and kind and amazing my girlfriend at the time was, and we have been together ever since. Married for 7 years now. Story 3. Not sure if it qualifies, but I used to live and work in the suburbs. One evening I was driving home at dusk. I was 18 to 19 and had the house to myself. Brother was out of town and mom was at her parents'. My job was about 10 miles from my house and maybe 6 turns on decently sized roads. I am a fairly observant person, and it would not be odd for the same car to be behind me for half of those turns, but this time a car followed me all the way to my residential street. I got a gut feeling I was being followed, so I passed my house and turned left. My house was one over from the corner of another residential street that was a quarter-mile loop that also had another small street in it that reconnected to the loop then back to my street. This car followed me as I made a loop. I then turned right to restart the loop, and it followed me again. This time I turned down the small street and completed the loop again. It followed me one more time. As I was about to make the loop for the fourth time, they finally drove off. I drove around another 5 minutes just to make sure they did not come back, as I had nowhere else to park except out front of my house. But I was creeped out the rest of the night. I slept with my door locked and barricaded and with a big kitchen knife. I have no idea if or why they followed me. Do not know if it was a friend pranking me or if my brother put one of his friends up to it, since it is the only time that has ever happened, and it was quite coincidental that I was alone. I worked retail, and some of the employees did have records, so I just do not know. Story 4. There was a guy I used to go to community college with back in 2014 to 2016. Call him Mark. Mark was older than me by several years, and if memory serves, was studying political science. We had mutual friends, and I would see him at parties or at hangouts. Cannot say he always gave me the creeps, but I definitely noticed there was something about him that was off. Ironically enough, he could be surprisingly charismatic and did not have a difficult time with women despite not being the most handsome guy in the world. What really got me, though, was one time at a hangout, Mark and I got to talking. I said something to him that made him stop and stare me down. I stared back because I thought it was in jest, and then I noticed there just was not anything in his eyes. Like staring into black holes. Truly unnerving. Remarkably intelligent guy, too. And I am almost ashamed to say that we ended up getting along for some time after that, because I was never able to shake the off feeling he gave me. But I could only ever tolerate him in doses, so I kept him at a distance until I found out who he really was. Apparently, years before we ended up at community college together, he had been in some kind of group living situation where he threw a party and seriously harmed a woman. Found this out through a close friend who knew him then, but who was beaten unconscious by the other people in the house before he could stop it from happening. He told me that Mark had apparently done psychedelics out in the desert with some friends prior to that incident, and when he got back, he was just different. Obviously, I ensured there was no contact between us anymore. Well, through mutual friends, I found out that a few years ago, he harmed his mom during a severe breakdown. His case made the local news. He is still so out of it, he has been placed into the state's mental institution for the rest of his life. Story 5. Last March, before my father passed away, I called my mom to see if she got a text message I had sent her after not talking to her for almost a year. Something had told me to call her, and when I did, she told me she was on the way to the hospital because my father was at urgent care and had a heart issue while talking to the doctor, and another one in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Later on that night, we found out that he had a heart issue 2 weeks prior around Valentine's as well, which is weird because around that time, myself as well as my brother started having really bad chest pains, to the point I told my husband I was about to go to the ER and not wait for my appointment a week later. We also found out that he had CHF, a blood clot in his 8th lung and 2 clots in his heart. Sadly, he passed away less than 2 months after finding this all out. After he passed away, his cardio told my mother he had a genetic heart condition that myself and my siblings need to be checked. So I now have the same cardio as my dad, and it is sad going in the office knowing my father was there. Story 6. This happened when I was 9. My cousin, who was 7 at the time, came over to my house to play, and my dad at the time had to leave the house to buy groceries while my mom was sleeping upstairs. We were told not to leave the house and to just play inside, but being children, we went outside to play at the playground anyways. The neighborhood was very quiet and empty that day. It was a gloomy and windy cold afternoon, and I think most of the neighborhood was napping. Me and my cousin were enjoying our time in the playground. Then suddenly a blue truck pulled up, and the 2 guys inside began staring at us. And at that point, I already slowly packed up our toys and was getting ready to run. I even whispered to my cousin to run with me if anything happened. Then eventually they got out of the truck, and one of them decided to ask us questions about the neighborhood, and as he was asking, I picked up the last toy and was ready to leave when thankfully, from a distance, I saw my dad pulling up into our neighborhood. My dad immediately stopped on the side of the road and told us to get in the house before the 2 guys could do anything, so we just ran home as quickly as we could. When I finally made it to our garage and got to see my dad, he gave me a totally deserved scolding And as he was lecturing me, I made eye contact with the two guys driving past our house. And for like a week straight, I was paranoid that they would break into our house and kidnap me because they saw where I lived. But nothing happened after that, thankfully. Those guys were definitely attempting something. I mean, they literally went to our neighborhood for no reason. They just asked about how good the neighborhood is, and when they did not get what they came for, they immediately left. That conversation was definitely a trap, most likely to gain our trust. During that year, there was a huge spike in kidnappings in my country. There was a girl around the same age as me, in a different state, who suffered the same fate. But sadly, her kidnapper used force to take her, and she is still missing until this day. This is more of a mixture of my gut feeling telling me to get out of there and the perfect timing of my dad's arrival. Felt like angels were watching over me that day. Story 7. So I am a practicing lawyer in Islamabad, Pakistan. Back in 2014, Pakistan was afflicted by frequent attacks due to the country's role in the fight against terror. One morning as I came from court to a little site office in the court premises that we had and was conversing with my other colleagues, the sound of gunfire began. Some of my junior colleagues tried to go and see what was going on, and I ushered them back inside for fear that they may catch a stray bullet. I bolted the doors from inside and asked them to remain seated. Now the doors were made of glass, and the rest of the wall was also glass. The gunfire continued for what I can sense was 10 minutes but seemed like an eternity. We all assumed that perhaps this was a skirmish between two litigating parties, and we did not want to be caught in the middle. The sound of gunfire increased, but we could not get a sense of the direction it was coming from. As the tension grew, I recited the Kalma and prepared for a shooter to stand in front of the glass door and harm us. Just then, a few bullets hit the rear wall of the small building we were in. This made it clear where the fire was coming from. I consulted with a colleague and sprang up to open the door and ushered everyone outside and pointed to where I wanted them to run. Being the last one to leave, I turned around and saw the shooter who followed us as we turned a corner to flee. Just as he was about to line up a shot at one of us, an anti-terror squad gunman stationed at the roof fired at the shooter and hit him in the chest. The shooter was wearing a vest, and just as he realized he was done, he pulled the cord, and I saw a human body being blown apart. In that state of panic and not knowing if there were other shooters, we ran until we could not see the court buildings. 14 people died that day and dozens were injured. We visited the scene days later, and I saw a crater where the shooter had blown himself up, right next to where I stood when I held the door open and ushered my colleagues out. Had we not bolted from there, we would be gone for sure. Glad I trusted my gut then. Story 8. Not me, but my mother has strong mother's intuition. Sometimes I will ask her before doing something risky how her gut feels. For example, when my brother and I were kids, we wanted to join the local Boy Scouts chapter. We saw a man standing outside of a grocery store signing people up. We begged and begged her, and she said no. She said a group of grown men taking young boys into the woods with limited contact to their parents was not her thing, and that the man signing people up made her nervous. Turns out our specific chapter had been harming little boys for 2 decades. She was shocked when it was on the news a year later. Another example, my mom, grandmother, cousin, and cousin's boyfriend went to the beach with me one day. My cousin was so cool to me, and her boyfriend seemed chill. I wanted to ride home with them, but my mom said no because they had been drinking. When I asked her again, she looked really scared and started yelling, saying, "There is no way you are getting in that car." So I rode home with my mom and grandma. Right behind us, they got in a really bad accident. The boyfriend was in the back seat and ended up upside down in the front passenger seat. The back of the car next to him, exactly where I would have been sitting, was gone. Literally ripped from the car and shredded apart. I would have died. Last example is tragic. One of my older cousins has some substance abuse issues. Her and her husband did. They just had a baby, and my mom was one of the first people to see the little boy. Even my aunt, my cousin's mother, did not see the baby yet. My mom took one look at him and saw some things that worried her. She told them both repeatedly to take him to the hospital because something was wrong. They ignored her. The baby passed away very, very soon after that, at most 2 weeks later. Story 9. A couple of times I trusted my gut and it saved me. Once was in high school, I had started experimenting with LSD and I really loved it. Still do, actually. Just do not partake that often. Anyway, I had a vial with me, around 50 or so doses, and there was a rave that was scheduled for that night. I had received maybe a dozen calls confirming that I would be there, and obviously I said yes. As I was about to leave the house, something told me to not go, and I listened. I went back up to my room, turned my cell phone off, and went to sleep. Woke up in the morning to over 200 messages. The narcotics department had shown up at the rave and arrested a lot of people, even for like a joint or two. Had I been caught, my life would have been over. I stopped selling that day and only share with my closest friends. Another incident a few years ago, my girlfriend and I were holidaying in Croatia. A friend of hers had also joined us. They are both really tiny, like 5 feet, maybe 40 kilograms. So I am always careful when I am out with them because they just seem like easy targets, especially in new places where I do not know the language. We were in a city called Split and decided to go bar hopping. Met some locals at one of the bars and we were ordering shots. Something told me to randomly keep switching drinks with the girls just in case. Just in case was right. The drinks had been spiked. I am not sure if they were meant for me or one of the girls, but my girlfriend was done. She can handle her drinks, but this was something else. It took a while to hit her, but by the time it did, we were at another bar. She was totally blackout drunk. Suddenly, I see one of the locals from the bar we were at earlier, and that freaked me out for some reason. He came up to me and said there is a party at his place, and we should go with him. I am pretty high, so I was like, okay. As we were heading out, I see these really large guys from the corner of my eye, and it looked like they were following us. I immediately turned to both the girls and told them to go to the restroom in our native language. Then I tell this guy I will meet him in a second, and I go towards the restroom too. Every single instinct is screaming at me to get everyone out of there and back to our apartment, and I did exactly that. I literally had to carry my girlfriend out of there. We did not find a cab, but we just kept walking. I have no idea what would have happened had I not listened, but I have come to realize that you do not ignore instincts. Story 10. I lived in one of the poorer areas of a major city, being poor myself. My block was usually fairly peaceful. This story is about the one time in 5 years I lived there when it was not. I went out to grab some food from a bodega. There were 2 bodegas close to me, one half a block away, the other one a couple blocks away, in opposite directions from each other. First odd thing was, when I stepped outside, nobody else was outside. This was summer, and usually there were a lot of people hanging out in front of the houses. I was going to go to the 2 blocks away bodega because it had better groceries and I figured I could pick some up while I was getting food. I turned to walk toward it and noticed a group of people I did not recognize on the corner, 3 or 4 guys. I immediately just decided to go to the closer one instead. It was not even a fully conscious decision. Everything just felt weird. As I was entering the bodega, loud gunfire rang out from down the block. 2 people were hit. 1 passed away. Would have happened right as I approached that intersection. Story 11. Well, maybe not scary, but definitely messed up and life-changing for me. Back in January, I suspected my wife was abusing alcohol again and having an affair. I kept telling myself there is no way. She claims to be 12 years sober, and I could not imagine her cheating on me. The night after a nice date night with an incredible nightcap, she's acting funny about coming to bed with me. Does her usual I am going to smoke and come to bed routine, but this time lingers around a bit to wait for me to put my phone down and go to sleep. Says she drank too much coffee and seems upset when I ask her for a second time, just to come lay with me and cuddle. She gives me a half-effort kiss and says, "You should go to sleep, it is late," and waits till I put my phone down and get under the covers to finally go outside and smoke. As soon as she walks outside, I grab my phone again and start scrolling, thinking I will just wait till she comes back in. Usually I might text her and tell her I am still up, or send her something funny while she is outside. But this time something told me not to. A half hour goes by, and I pick my phone back up, ready to text her, "You coming back in soon?" And I swear the voice of God tells me, "Do not text her, go outside now." It was the craziest feeling and so surreal. It was not a voice in my head, but a voice all around me, and I felt like I was not even controlling my body as I immediately got up and went outside. I walk out to the parking lot and notice she is not out smoking, and something tells me, go to the car. Sure enough, as soon as I am walking to the car, she is getting out with a drink in her hand. She is completely startled, puts the drink down and grabs a can of Coke out the car. I ask, what was that? She says I am just drinking a Coke. I reach around her and grab a tall can of White Claw out the car, and she immediately panics. She is telling me it is not what I think it is, and she just started again, then completely shuts down. I am furious and questioning her, but the whole time she is texting on her phone and refusing to talk to me. I know she would not be texting her friends because it is late, and no way she would want them to know she is drinking again. She swears by AA and has a huge presence in the AA community, and her friends all think she is sober. She passes out drunk after refusing to talk to me, and again this voice tells me, look at her phone now. On her phone are messages from her affair partner, telling her it is okay, you can still come over. I open her phone and realize she had been texting him, but forgot to delete the last couple texts because she was so drunk. She is texting him laughing that I found out everything, and he is mad and making me sleep in the girl's room, as he tells her to just come over to his house still. He is the neighbor in the complex right next to us. Needless to say, I filed for divorce the next day. She tried to claim an emotional affair, blah, blah, blah. But a couple of weeks later, while she was asleep, I found even more messages confirming this had been going on for months, and they were going on dates and meeting up all the time. All the AA meetings and going to the gym and going to my friends were 90% lies. Pretty heartbreaking, but so glad I trusted my gut finally, because I spent months not trusting it until finally divine intervention forced me to. Story 12. I never got confirmation that he was up to what I feared, but even if he was not, and just being a salesman, I know my gut feeling was appropriate. It is the one time in my life where I recall such a strong urge to stay away. I cannot really explain it other than I just knew. I have struggled with severe anxiety, psychosis, poor impulse control, and addiction, but it pales in comparison when looking back on that moment. To set the scene, I was about 6 years old. My sister, my neighbor, and I were all outside playing with chalk on my driveway. My mom was inside with the window thankfully open to hear us, but she was not visible. As per the stereotype, a big white utility van pulled up to the curb. The windows were blacked out. A man gets out and approaches us and asks if we could come to the van and have some milk. He told me he was another neighbor's milkman. I remembered my parents telling me not to talk to strangers, but something in my gut took that to the extreme. Alarm bells rang in my mind, so I put my little sis behind me and begged my friend not to go. My friend went anyways, but I kept my sis with me. I hated milk anyways. Later learned I am lactose intolerant, but that did not even cross my mind at the time. The man started walking up the driveway towards us, and with each step I backed away, repeatedly telling my sis not to interact. He had us pinned near the gate, and I had no idea what to do besides stand in these rocks barefoot, wedging my sis behind me against the gate. I was desperately trying to think of a way to escape, and was fully prepared to kick, scream, and bite if he grabbed me or my sis. I would have gone for his legs and make him lose balance if he grabbed my sis or friend, and I would have clawed his face and arms off if he grabbed me and aimed for the eyes. Thankfully, my mom heard this interaction. She came flying down the stairs and out the door and berated the man. I have never seen her that riled or loud before or since. I do not remember what she yelled, but the guy got defensive, but she talked over him before he could get out a few words. He huffed, drove off, without making his alleged delivery to the neighbors. My sis and I ran to my mom immediately, and my friend was upset she did not get her chocolate milk, but she recovered quickly. I would like to think he was just a salesman trying to get to the kids to get more sales from the parents, and maybe his delivery was further down the street. Still, most of me still suspects he had other plans for us. I had not seen him before or since. It has been around 14 years now, and I still remember it clearly. As a side note, one of my mom's classmates was abducted, and it took years to find her body, so she was understandably overprotective and made sure I knew exactly what to do if someone snatched me. Then when I was 10, my city had a rather serious case of something similar that happened to a girl around my age, and that rattled everyone nearby. Story 13. I was at the LA County Fair in 2007 when I was 19. Was there with my cousins and I needed to pee really badly. I left them while they were getting food and I ran to the restrooms nearby at one of the flower garden exhibits. I must have made a wrong turn when I walked out. I was looking at my phone when I ended up in some back area and there was a cop car there. My cousins had texted me to meet them at the colored exit or entrance after because we needed to get picked up. I saw the cop in his car. He had his window down. He was a white guy, maybe 25 to 30 years old, and I just kind of panicked because I knew we had to leave, so I asked him, "Hey, do you know where this exit is? Because I am getting picked up there." And then he goes, "Are you messing with me? There is no exit or entrance that color." But I was sure of myself that it was the right one. So I told him that, and he told me to come closer to him so he can show me the map. Mind you, I was not all the way up to the driver window, so he was kind of showing me from a distance. Then he gestures his hand to come more close and proceeds to tell me, "Come on, dude, get in the car and I will show you a closer look." In my gut, I knew it did not sit right with me. His tone and everything just scared me and I was like, "Oh, actually, you know what? I know where to go now." And I just kind of jogged in the other direction and maneuvered my way back. I started to cry on the way back because I just knew I avoided something really bad happening. I eventually got to the pickup area and met up with my cousins, and I did not tell them until last year. I have never felt so scared in my life, and at that moment, the reality set in that men are just as vulnerable as women in certain situations. Just sucks that it totally changed my outlook on the police, and I have such bad trust issues because of it. Story 14, I used to explore abandonments. One day it was unseasonably warm for January, nearly t-shirt weather. I had gone for a drive through the country by myself just to enjoy the sunshine, and at one point came across what used to be a summer resort house or inn in the woods. To access it, I had to park down the road and hike in. I entered through a window in a living room type space and then wandered around. The layout was kind of winding with a lot of short corridors and connecting small rooms, like a kitchen with two doors connecting to hall, utility sink room, pantry, etc. The place was in major disrepair. After finishing the first floor, I went up to the second floor. I had only just started wandering that level when I came towards a room and sensed something really dark about it. I just had that feeling that it was time to get out. I also realized I had been really foolish on this, as nobody knew where I was, my car was far off, I had zero gear and self-protection, etc. I started downstairs at a pretty brisk pace. Downstairs, while heading toward the exit, I glanced down at the floor. It had a film of condensation on it from the wild temperature changes. I could see my fresh footprints in the moisture from where I had been previously. I also saw a second pair of footprints coming out from a room and following mine. Honestly, that was one of the last times I explored abandonments. I had a hard time recruiting friends to join me, and it was just too risky to keep doing it solo. Story 15, I always told my daughter to trust her gut. She had a friend in elementary school, 4th or 5th grade. We were sort of friends with the family too, so knew them pretty well. My daughter's invited to spend the night with her friend one night and comes home, and all is good until she gets invited to spend the night again and says she does not want to spend the night there again. I ask why she says the dad gave her the creeps. I start to ask all the questions like, did he do anything to her, touch her, take her in a room alone, show her anything? She answers no to everything and just said he was creepy. I asked her if she wanted her friend to sleep over here, and she said no. I did not push her on this, but would occasionally ask her questions over the next few weeks to get any ideas if anything inappropriate happened, but nothing happened. We stopped hanging out with them, but not for that reason, just a busy life with 4 kids. Fast forward 5 years, and the dad is arrested for harming a child and the wife divorced him. My daughter and I have talked about this incident many times, and she always thanks me for listening to her, and I always tell her it is because I could not listen to her when I taught her to trust her gut. If I forced this friendship, then I was teaching her not to trust her gut, and I did not want to do that, so I trusted her gut. Story 16, I was going home late from my college campus as I was studying for exams in the library until 8 p.m. By the time I was walking to the bus stop, it was almost 9 p.m. I was waiting at the bus stop I always wait at, and the bus arrives. As the bus pulled in, I noticed that there were only 3 people in the bus, not super uncommon, especially at this time of night. But the weird thing was that 2 of the 3 passengers were staring right at me without breaking eye contact. When the bus driver opened the door, he too did the same. He did not say anything to me, he just blankly and coldly stared at me. It was very unnerving. I got a very weird feeling about this entire thing, so I waved him off and told him that I forgot something and needed to go back, and for them to just go on without me. But in response to this, the bus driver immediately chimed in saying, "No, you should not go back. It is late. You can always get that thing tomorrow when you come back. It is quite unsafe out there at this time of night." It felt like the bus driver was trying to coax me into the bus, so I immediately started walking away and telling him it is fine. I started walking towards a place I knew there was a security camera and a campus SOS button in case anything happened. After a few seconds of walking, I heard the bus start to leave and I felt the adrenaline in my body. I waited for another bus at the station, and after about 30 minutes, another one came. But this one was filled with a few more people and looked like a normal bus, so I got on. Got home safe. Then a few days later, I heard a news report of a stolen bus from a bus depot and a crew of men who were on said bus kidnapping young adults, mainly college students like me, by pretending to be a bus driver and a couple of passengers, making it seem like a normal bus when it was not. As described, the three passengers would take care of the victim. They were able to do this quite easily as the bus was in motion when they did their act, so the victim could not easily escape. When I read that story, I was horrified to learn that I could have been one of those victims had I not listened to my gut on that one. I still think about it to this day whenever I enter a bus late at night. Story 17. Me and my friends were teenagers at a park in Luxembourg on a hot summer day, smoking joints and drinking some beers. Some random dudes, also teens, a little older, but not by too much, came and asked if we wanted some of what they were drinking. This was very common. It is a small country, and everyone knows each other, and the crime rate is relatively chill. But I said no, and I told my best friend not to as well. They had a disgusting aura to them. Some other friends in the group did take some sips, and I begged my best friend not to again before heading a few meters away to bum a cigarette off of someone sitting in the grass next to us. When I came back, I saw my best friend take a sip of the Malibu coconut bottle. I told her we needed to leave immediately. I just knew there was something in there. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind for some reason. My other friend said I was overreacting, and I angrily grabbed my best friend and said we were rushing to the nearest Quick, Belgian version of McDonald's. By the time we got close to the Quick, her feet were dragging and her words were slurring, and I was literally pulling her to the establishment. I called her mother from the Quick bathrooms and told her everything, as my best friend was lying on the toilet floor, almost paralyzed. It all got sorted out, and she was fine in the end, thankfully. I know this seems obvious now, but on a summer day as a carefree punk teenager who shares drinks with the whole group and does not see consequences, that instant just struck me as particularly dangerous and stood out to me as weird even then, as soon as it was happening. I am so happy I dragged my best friend out of there. We are both adults now. Safe to say we do not accept drinks from random anyones anymore. Story 18. I worked a lot in remote areas of West Texas, servicing oil field-related equipment. One time I was out in the middle of nowhere as usual, and to the northeast was a butte, an isolated hill that is bigger than a regular hill but smaller than a mountain. But everywhere else around was pretty flat. There was one road in and out of the site I was at. At some point when I was working on a control box, I had the overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I scanned the horizon, looked all around the butte, and went back to work. This happened a few more times within several minutes until I finally saw something move on the side of one of the rock outcroppings on the butte. I went to my truck, grabbed my binoculars, and the figure hid behind that outcropping. It was definitely a human. I glassed him for a good 20 minutes and I could see him peek around every couple of minutes. Eventually he leaned out so far that I could see the silhouette of the barrel of a rifle slung around his back. At some point he was hidden behind his rock for a while, and the next time he peeked out, I could not see the rifle. He had either put it down somewhere, or he was now holding it. I immediately felt a sense of impending doom. The hair on my arms and neck was standing straight up. I very quickly collected my tools, got my AR-15 from behind the driver's seat and sat it on the passenger seat, and tore out of there. I sped down the dirt road, almost clipped the cattle guard, and started cruising down the highway just as the adrenaline started to wear off. I remember the metal taste in my mouth and having to grip the steering wheel to keep my fingers from twitching. A few miles down the road, a maroon Suburban full of guys was pulled over on the oncoming side of the road. They definitely were not oil field workers. Shades all around. Buzzed heads, all intently looking at me. I expected them to pull a U-turn and pursue me, but they did not. I cannot prove that this is what was happening, but I do know that cartel guys run operations where one scouts for guys working alone and calls in a group of guys to rob them of their truck and tools. Story 19. When I was a teenager, I worked as a bagger at a local grocery store, and one of the job duties was to go out in the parking lot and collect the carts to bring them inside. It was a summer night and I was the closing bagger. It was pretty quiet in the store, and no one had gotten carts in a while, so I went out to collect them all before the store closed. It was roughly 11:30, so I am collecting the carts, minding my business, and I notice a large truck idling toward the back of the parking lot. I did not think much of it. I just figured that someone was waiting for someone else to come out of the store, and they wanted to stay in the car. The store I worked at was fairly big and had two entrances on either side of the store. Because we did not have many employees at the end of the night, one side of the store's entry was always closed and locked around 9 p.m. So this side of the parking lot was pretty empty. I moved to the middle of the parking lot after collecting the carts closest to the open doors. And after a few minutes, I noticed that the truck I had seen earlier was now in the middle of the parking lot, still toward the back, but had definitely moved and there were fewer cars in this part of the lot. I kept a mental note of it and reminded myself to keep an eye on the truck to see if it moved again. 5 minutes later, I am now at the far end of the lot where the doors are closed and no one is parked. Sure enough, the truck had followed me over there. This time not parked at the back, now more in the middle, a lot closer to me. Immediately, I figured out what was likely going on, and I went back into the store, staring at the truck as much as I could to hopefully give them the message that I see them. I know what they are doing. I went inside and told my manager what was happening, and she asked me to come outside with her to point out the vehicle to get a plate number just in case a police report was needed. We go back out into the lot, and the truck is now closer to the open doors. I point at the truck. My manager starts to write the plate number down, and the truck takes off. I am not entirely sure what was happening that night, but it was in SLC, which is a high trafficking area. I am really lucky that I was being observant that night. Story 20. In 2022, around October, me and one of my friends were hanging out. She was a classmate of mine during high school. We decided to go on Ome TV. We met a guy who presented himself as Alexander, or Alex and Joker as a nickname. He also presented himself as a psychiatrist or psychotherapist, around 30 years old. I had some doubts about him and the vibe I got from him. Something felt wrong, but I did not want to judge him already. I waited to see if he is who he says he is or if he is lying. My friend was single at that time. She was dealing with some mental issues. She was physically abused in her last relationship, and she was on medication, but in less than a week or so, they became a couple. We became a group of four. Another friend of us and former classmate joined. We started to talk on Discord almost daily. At some point, I suggested to have a barbecue together at my place. Wrong idea if you ask me right now. But I was not aware what he was capable of. In less than a month, he started to show his true self. Abusive, controlling, manipulative. He even showed us his weapons collection. He had some swords, a machete. He said he also had some pistols in his car. One day, me and my two friends were hanging out at one of their places. They had a fight several days before, and she started ignoring him. When we were together, he started calling her, got ignored, then started to threaten her family, verbally abusing her, accusing her of sleeping with multiple men in her past. She had only 2 relationships in the past, so it was not really the case. We decided that it is better if she breaks up with him. For several days she agreed, but for some unknown reasons, she got back together with him several days after. From that point, I was sure he manipulated her somehow to get back together, so I decided that I will speak with her about it. I was there for her when she went through the traumas of her last relationship. She was down, started to have multiple issues, nightmares. She was afraid of human contact. Her sleep schedule was also affected and so on. These were clear signs of PTSD and depression. She was feeling better when she met this guy. I did not want to see her in the same situation as before, I warned her that I have some concerns about this guy, and I do not really want to wait until she goes through something traumatic again, and she would be better to cut him out of her life. Several days later, she asked both of us to join a call on Discord. She told both of us to stop this competition between each other. I did not consider him any kind of competition. I did not have any romantic feelings for her. I have just presented my concerns about him. He was angry at me because he felt threatened and told me to mind my own business. That is when I decided to stop caring about them, especially her. I was still there for her when she needed, but I was not going to stay with them anymore. Her mother also warned her about this guy. She started seeing him without her mother's approval. She was lying to her that she is hanging out with me and the other friend. We were still hanging out, but it was obvious she just wanted him to be there. We were just the cover-up of her relationship. One day after we were hanging out, I went with her to her place to make sure she arrived safe. I did not really want to stay at her place, but she asked me to come. She is living with her mother. Her mother is always home. We played some card games. I was keep winning, and jokingly, I asked her if she will go and tell Alexander that I won at cards. I was aware she was hiding her relationship, but at that moment, I forgot. She then went to her room, probably talked with him. Then her mother asked me what happened. I told her I was just joking. I lied to her that they do not talk anymore. She came back. I told her I was sorry for what happened. He decided to text me and told me we have an emergency meeting on Discord when I arrive home. I did not join and decided to go no contact with all of them. This happened mid-December. They spent their New Year's Eve together, all three of them. He kept messaging me. The messages were accusatory, then nicer ones. On the night of New Year's Eve, he even invited me to join. To have a beer, I told them I am not coming. In February, I got 2 voicemails from him on WhatsApp, threatening me to come to my house and harm me. He knew where I was living since I invited them to the barbecue. He was really aggressive in those voicemails. I sent them fast to myself, so in case he deletes them, I still have them. I made sure to have them on my PC as well. In March, finally, I started speaking with my friends again. They were both saying they were sorry for not listening to me the first time when I warned them he is dangerous and probably a psychopath. I sent both of them the voicemails I got. I have also found out the guy asked the girls to borrow money for the New Year's Eve apartment. Where they went, he never paid back. After everything, we decided to talk with his mother. I was not feeling safe in my own house. I was always watching the windows in case I see him. I got some anxiety from this situation. He knew where I was living, where I was studying. He showed us some of his weapons. He told me he had some pistols in his car, so I was worried he might do something to me. At some point, I got 2 Facebook friend requests from him from 2 different accounts. I know they were from him because the profile photos were photos with him. We knew he had a family name, but the family name of one of the accounts I got the request from was different. This was odd, so I started a small investigation on these accounts. It turns out he was lying about his job. On Facebook, he had listed that he was cashier of a store, finished journalism at university. I was not sure if I should press charges against him. I had all the evidence possible, with the voicemails being the most important ones. But I knew that if I pressed charges against him, I would have to involve both my friends, and from what I talked with them, they did not want to be involved, so I stopped, even if I was still feeling unsafe. For 1 year, I did not receive any signs from him. Recently, I got a notification on TikTok that he watched my profile. Story 21, I went camping at a small lake down at the end of a logging road a few years back. It was a beautiful place, but hard to get to. The logging road was extremely difficult to drive down and had multiple low points where water ran over it or was close to. Anyway, the day is great. I do some fishing, pitch a tent, and make camp. It is beautiful and calm and relaxing. I have my dinner and go to bed. At 3 a.m., I wake up suddenly because something is different. I check out the camp and do not see or hear anything. I look up at the sky and the weather's clear, but I just could not shake the idea that I was in danger. I had a signal where I was thankfully, and so I checked the forecast. It turns out there was a storm system heading my way very, very quickly. The ETA was that it would hit in 30 minutes and it was expected to have heavy winds and lots of rain. Well, that is all I needed to hear. I threw all my stuff in my tent, broke it down and used it as a big sack to carry everything up to my car. No time to pack properly. I threw everything in the back and started making my way back up the old logging road in absolute darkness, trying to navigate with memory and headlights. By the time I had packed the car, the wind had started to pick up. 5 minutes later, the rain started. 10 minutes after that, it was torrential. The low points on the logging road were quickly becoming little rivers, and the last one was dicey getting through it, but I made it out. To this day, I am amazed at the response I had while unconscious to changing weather. I could not even tell what it was when I was awake, just that I was in danger. Another shorter story that did not end up having a bad follow-up. I used to work doing in-home service calls. I had a new customer phone me up and ask me for help. I had never seen the guy before, but he seemed nice, big smile, was making friendly conversation while I worked. But at one point I looked into his eyes and I got chills. He looked like a predator, like something hunting and watching its prey. People on here described seeing dead eyes, and it was kind of like that, but also malicious at the same time. His eyes looked like this while he was being friendly, and I just could not shake that this is someone who is faking everything about themselves, but that he could not hide his eyes. Anyway, nothing has happened with him as far as I know. I never did more work for him though. I just did not want to be alone in a room with that guy. Story 22. When I was around 12 or 13, I went away to sleepaway camp for 3 days. It was only 2 hours away from my house. After my parents dropped me off, they went back home. That night they ordered pizza. At the time, the treadmill in our house was facing the front window of our house, and while my dad was on it, he noticed this car going around our circle, very slowly, and it stopped by our house. My dad just assumed someone got lost and ignored it, because it happens every once in a blue moon. My brother and his girlfriend took my dad's truck to get the pizza, and the car drove away. When my brother and his girlfriend left, there were no cars in the front of the house. The car came back and pulled into our driveway. This lady came out of the car. She had a girl in the passenger seat with her. She had to be around my age at the time. She got out and fixed her dress, my dad said, and she came up to the door. And my dad answered it, and she just kind of stood there. My dad said, "Can I help you?" And she said that her biblical map brought her there. And my dad was confused and said, "Okay." And she finally left and drove away slowly. After that, my mom filed a police report afterwards because the whole thing just felt off to my parents. Around 10 days later, I came back home, and I was home alone. My parents told me everything that happened, and I did not think much of it. I went on the treadmill, and my dog followed me, and I started to run. Something kept telling me to look behind at the window as I was running. Then I saw my brother pull into the driveway. I was confused why he came home early, because he usually comes back later in the day. He went upstairs, and I continued to run. I kept every couple of minutes looking behind me, and by the fifth time I looked behind me, the lady my parents talked about was walking up my driveway towards the window. I jumped off the treadmill and ran upstairs yelling my brother's name. We filed another police report, but something told my brother to come home earlier that day. He was going to go to his girlfriend's house, but he just came home. Also, my neighbor came over a couple of days later and said, "If that ever happens again, stay in the house. That could be a trafficker." Story 23, I lived in a small town and drove to high school 20 miles away through the forest. Coming home late one night after work, I saw a vehicle on the side of the road with the hood up. It is customary to stop and help stranded motorists and is usually someone from town. I carried water, antifreeze, oil, and transmission fluid just in case. The guy who was there was nice enough looking, smiled, and seemed okay, but I instantly got a bad vibe. I put down my window 1/3 the way, acting like I was cold. He said his car overheated and a friend was on the way. He looked in the bed of my truck and said, "Oh, you have antifreeze. If you let me use it, then I can get going quicker." I lied and said it was empty, and I was glad he had help. He then said if I was not busy, he would pay me gas to take him into town. I said I had to get home because my dog was locked up all day, another lie, and drove off. 2 weeks later, when at church, me and a few friends went to the bathroom to escape the sermon. That same stranger was sitting in the lobby. He did not see us as he was looking outside. My friend pulled us down the hall quickly into the bathroom. She informed us that was her sister's ex-husband who tried to hurt her and was the reason her whole family moved to Arizona from Oregon. I volunteered to go tell her dad, who got the sheriff, who also was in church that morning, involved. When I told the family about my encounter, they let me know I was lucky. He had assaulted a woman who helped him when his car was broken down years earlier. Story 24. I live under an Airbnb rental, and people were going to stay for a while, so I took my dog to my parents' house while the guests were going to stay. He barks a lot when I am gone at work. Well, he was there for like a month on and off. I live close to my parents, so it is not bad, and we saw each other a lot. After a while, I got tired of him being there and wanted him home and said, who cares if the Airbnb get upset? I want him home with me. I remember my mom saying, yeah, I understand. Well, the next night I had a dream I was inside the house with my parents and my dog. I was holding him crying and bawling my eyes out and did not care that my parents were behind me watching. I think I was happy to see him or sad, I cannot remember. But I do remember I did not want to let him go. I just know I was bawling my eyes out. I woke up and thought, wow, that was a weird dream. I had the thought to tell someone, but I did not and went to work. Later that day, I got a call from my dad saying I needed to come home immediately. Something happened to my dog. So I start driving to their house, tears already in my eyes, thinking the worst possible thoughts. Well, sure enough, I get there, and my dog is dead. He was laying underneath my dad's truck, and my dad did not know he was there when he started to drive off. He was also devastated, we all were. It was tough and sad. But I still remember that dream. It is like I was mentally preparing for it or something. And even telling my mom I wanted him home just the day before. It was all so bizarre. This was 2 years ago, and I miss that dude so much. Story 25. Whenever my wife and I drive to her grandma's house, I play a little joke where I pretend to forget which street it is on and either turn down the street before or drive past and turn the street after. Nearly 20 years, and it has never gotten old. To me, at least. Anyway, for a few years, we had moved out of state and were coming back home to visit and stay at Grandma's house. It was late at night, and we were just getting into the area, and I turned off the main road into her neighborhood. A car turned off the main road after me, not that I thought anything of it, and then came the time to play my genius prank of forgetting the correct street. I turned, my wife groaned and rolled her eyes, and I laughed. But I also noticed that the car that had turned off the main road behind us also turned down the street too. I made another turn to head towards the correct street, and sure enough, the other car turned that way too. This could easily be a coincidence. Anybody could have made 3 of the same turns as us, no big deal. But I decided to put it to the test. I essentially drove in a big circle. I made 2 more turns so I would be going back where I came from, and the other car followed us right up until the last turn, when they probably figured something was up, and then they sped off in the opposite direction. The next morning, my wife looked up local police news, and apparently someone had been carjacked in that neighborhood shortly after we reached Grandma's house, which easily could have been us if I had not noticed them. I called the cops to give them what information I could, admittedly not very much, but the important thing is now I get to prank my wife whenever I want, and if she objects, I can remind her how I saved us from being robbed. Story 26. Had a pain one day a few days before my period. The pain was really bad, and I decided to go to the gynecologist. They brushed it off, saying it was just period pains. I went on birth control to help with the pain, and it did nothing. Over the next year, I continued to have this awful pain until one day, I was sitting in my mom's car. The pain became so bad, and this time it was constant. I begged my mom for help, and she dropped me off at the emergency room, peak COVID times, so she could not come with me. I was 19 at the time. After arguing and screaming in pain with nurses, they finally took me seriously and ran tests. Over the last year, I had been having an ovarian torsion. That morning in the car, my ovary flipped for the 4th and final time. The unbearable pain was my ovary filling with blood and my fallopian tube being shredded as it was pulled away from my uterus. In the hospital, the pain that made my ears ring about 20 minutes before being wheeled off for surgery. My ovary had ruptured, and I was bleeding internally. I now am 22 years old without my right ovary and the scars to prove the medical neglect. When you have a pain, trust your gut and push harder for more tests to be run. They could have possibly saved my ovary if I pushed for an ultrasound the first time I had pain. Instead, it took an entire year until my ovary exploded inside of my body. It grew to 3 times larger than it should have been. Now, I am on medications to not have periods because of the trauma alone, and because I still have really bad periods. Story 27. When I was a freshman in high school in 2015, My neighborhood had a slew of break-ins and robberies. No one was ever harmed to my knowledge because most of the break-ins happened while the families were gone, but lots of valuables were taken, and some families even had a bit of damage to their houses. Minor fixes, but nonetheless, it was scary to think that this person was targeting our neighborhood. These break-ins would happen within days of each other, and it put a lot of fear in our neighborhood because a handful of the homeowners had small children, ranging from 2 years old to my age at the time, 14. We also realized that the guy was breaking into these houses in order, starting from the very back of the neighborhood and working his way up. Now, up to this point, the guy was never caught. No one even knew what he looked like. Well, one day I was homesick from school, and my parents told me I should stay home. Being 14, they knew I was old enough, and they could trust me. But because of the break-ins, they had their worries, obviously. But I convinced them that everything would be fine if I kept the doors locked and just kept in touch with them. So I did. Around 1 to 2 p.m., I was with my dogs in the living room, watching TV when I heard a knock at my door. Of course, they start going ballistic, but me being absolutely oblivious, I tried to hush them so I could open the door, but they both were just going at it towards this person on the other side. Mind you, my dogs are absolutely harmless, but their barks are damn near malicious. If they were not my own dogs and I heard that bark without knowing or seeing them, it would scare me. Anyways, I try to hush them, but they just will not quit. One of my dogs goes to the kitchen where we have a window looking into the front yard, and what he does next absolutely sent chills down my back. I could see the hairs standing up on him, and he let out the most malicious growl I had ever heard from him. I was even shocked he made that noise. Then he started barking again, which made my other dog go beside him and do the same. At this point, I knew something was up, and I go up to the door, make sure it is locked, then text my dad. After about 5 minutes of this, they just stop. I assume whoever was at the front door had finally left. My dad texts me back immediately and says he sent a cop to check on me and the house. He was a dispatcher, so it was easy to get in touch with emergency services, thank the Lord. The cop shows up seconds later, and my dad tells me to open the door and talk to him. I do for about 5 to 10 minutes, then he leaves. Everything was normal after that. Right after the cop left, he found the 17-year-old thief hiding in the wooded area surrounding our neighborhood. Turns out he was living in the woods, and he would hide all the valuables he stole from each house in a hole near where he slept. On his person when they found him was tons of rope and a gun. Apparently, he had noticed me walk out to check our mail about 30 minutes prior, put two and two together that I was a teenage girl all alone home from school, and thought my house would be the perfect one for his next hit. Only reason he never went through with it was because he was scared of my dogs. To this day, I have never hushed my dogs again for barking at someone behind our door. There are two things you should always trust: your gut and your dogs. Story 28. When I, 26F, was in college, 19 at the time, I worked downtown at a coffee shop in my city. The shop paid for our parking at a local garage that was a few blocks away, and it was not uncommon to be walking there alone. I am a relatively cautious and nervous person, so I tend to stay aware of my surroundings, especially when it is dark and I am downtown. This night I had finished my shift and was leaving to go to my car. It was a weekend, so a lot of people were out, and I was not too nervous about anything. I turned a corner and after a few steps noticed a guy that was way behind me. Before I turned, was suddenly much closer than before. I noted this and kept walking. He followed for 3 blocks, and I got to the garage, which is shared by a hotel, and thought I would probably lose him when I went inside to get to the garage. For this garage, if you are not a hotel guest, you go in through the employee door and take an elevator up. My gut sank when he followed me in. Thankfully, there was another lady in the elevator, but the man followed me and would not stop staring. His eyes were on me the entire time, and I was sweating. The other lady's floor came before mine, but I just followed her out and quickly pretended like I was getting in a car and ducked so he could not see me. He stepped out of the elevator and looked around for a minute before going back inside and leaving. My heart was pounding, I was shaking, I was sweating bullets, so I just sat there for a few minutes before walking the rest of the way up to my car. Went into work the next day, and there was a new policy that we could not walk to the garage alone because a girl got assaulted in the elevator that night.